Look, it's impossible for me to talk to a psychiatrist.
Any thoughts at all on why you blacked out?
I don't know. Stress, maybe.
Sometimes when a problem is psychological, yes, we seek help. But when it comes to our finances, often we don't realize that the problem has nothing to do with our portfolio. Oftentimes, it's right here between our two ears. The question becomes, could a psychological roadblock be jeopardizing your own retirement goals? It's time once again to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. Hello, I'm David Scranton. If you are a regular viewer, and I hope that you are, you know that I believe that the keys to financial success are both external as well as internal. Let's face it, all the money in the world will not guarantee success if a psychological condition is constantly driving you toward making poor decisions. At the same time, a psychological roadblock may be what's preventing you from improving your financial state, not necessarily a lack of options. Today, we're going to talk about some of the psychological roadblocks that undermine financial success and retirement planning for people at all earning levels and all asset levels. Helping us will be our special guest, author and life coach, Mike Pettigrew. But first, let's talk about perhaps the most common source of all psychological roadblocks, which is fear. On last week's show, we discussed how scam artists manipulate the two basic emotions that drive everyone's financial decisions: fear and greed. The extent to which a person can be manipulated by either of those emotions depends on that person's psychological makeup. Some people are more naturally fearful than others. Some are more naturally eager to achieve or obtain, i.e. more naturally greedy, you might say. But no one is completely immune from the potential pitfalls of fear and greed when it comes to their money. Either can be the source of a psychological roadblock to financial success. And fear is probably the most common of all roadblocks. So let's take a look at some of the ways that fear, be it conscious or subconscious, can create a barrier to successful money management. Roadblock number one, what the kids today call FOMO, fear of missing out. Have you ever been to a baseball or football game where your team was down by a ridiculous amount late in the game? What usually happens in that situation? Well, about half or more of the crowd leaves early, while the other half sticks around until the bitter end, just hoping for a miraculous comeback. Some are motivated mainly by team loyalty, some by natural optimism, but many others are compelled by the fear of missing out. They stick around because they're afraid of not being there to see the miraculous comeback if it actually does happen. That same kind of fear is what compels many people to wait until it's too late to pull out of a volatile stock market, or to listen when their advisor tells them, hang in there because the market always comes back. Or, as we discussed on last week's show, to get taken in by a scam artist when everybody tells them, look, all your friends will be making a bundle on this investment. You don't want to miss out. Somewhat related to this is fear roadblock number two, fear of being judged. As I've discussed before on the show, as well as in my books, good money management often requires having the ability to take the road less traveled, to do what the majority of people are not doing, confident that it's in your own best interest, and simply not caring what other people think or say. Now that can be extremely difficult for some people, but there are other ways the fear of being judged can create a roadblock. In fact, a recent study followed employees at companies that offered financial education seminars. Despite the obvious need to learn about their finances, only 17% of company employees attended. Unfortunately, this is way, way too common. And when surveyed as to why they declined to attend, researchers paraphrased the typical response this way: Bob doesn't want to attend his 401k seminar because he's afraid he'll see his neighbor there, his fellow employee there. And that would be the equivalent of admitting that he didn't know about money for all those years. In other words, the fear of being judged has created an irrational roadblock to making what most of these people probably know deep down is a smart financial move, and that is to attend the seminar to learn more. A similar roadblock prevents or at least delays many people from consulting with a financial advisor, even though they know on some level it's also a smart financial move. More accurately, though, that can best be described as the fear of bad news. In fact, studies show that 92% of Americans agree that it's important to get an annual physical, but only 62% actually do it. Men over 40 are in the group that are most likely to avoid checkups and doctor's visits in general. In many cases, I think we just don't want to get the bad news. We know that we're not taking care of ourselves as well as we should, but we're still afraid of learning that we might be even worse shape than we already thought. By the same token, the irrational fear of being told that our financial situation is worse than they thought or completely hopeless creates a roadblock to achieving good fiscal help for many, many people. Again, especially men over the age of 40. Understanding how fear can work against you is one aspect of mastering the inside game, which I talk about a lot in my book, Return on Principle. This concept of mastering this internal game. This inside game relates to emotion, goals, life experience, and all the internal factors that influence your relationship with money, including, yes, psychological roadblocks. We'll discuss the inside game further and share some tips for getting around your own psychological roadblocks later in today's show. Now it's time to welcome our guest, Mike Pettigrew. Mike is the author of several best-selling books, including Unlock Gratitude Now and The Most Powerful Goal Achievement System in the World. He has built and sold more than 15 businesses, and his companies have made millions. But he also knows about the dangers of bad decision-making and trusting the wrong people. After selling his first business to a multinational company, Mike lost everything, even reaching a point where he had no money for food for his wife or their newborn baby. In the end, however, he transformed the situation and went on to become an even greater success. Now he specializes in helping others transform their own circumstances and to achieve their loftiest goals. Mike, it's my pleasure to have you here on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, David.
So for most of our viewers, which might be unfamiliar with the story of your loss and recovery, do you mind sharing?
Sure. Well, I started my first, I started my first business when I was 15, but I started my first real business when, back in 1987, and it was a plant business. We rented and sold tropical plants to offices, and that went great. And I built that business over 14 years, up to the point where I sold it to a multinational. And I thought I'd take an early retirement at that stage, but you know what? Life often has twists and turns we can't possibly expect. And as you said a moment ago, I trusted the wrong people. I made bad decisions, bad investments, and just a few short years later, it was all gone. Our son was born, and I couldn't feed him or my wife or myself. And it's incredibly frightening when you lose everything and you can't look after your loved ones. And I suppose it was a double shock for me because I'd been very successful. I'd been very positive, very optimistic, and that served me. And I'm really, the mind creates, and what we dwell upon the most happens. And I really discovered it going through pure hell. I reached the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And I don't know whether my prayer was answered, but I vowed to the universe, this has got to change. I must change. I will change. And the very next day, I picked up a book written over 100 years ago. And that book, David, was all about the power of gratitude. And I realized, really, it just hit me so strongly, how far I had sunk from someone very optimistic and confident and capable to hating myself, berating myself, doubting myself, feeling so guilty. And I realized that if it was to change this situation, I had to change my dominant thoughts and my dominant emotions, because that's what creates our circumstances.
Yeah,
Hard reality.
people beat themselves up all the time when
Terrible.
something goes wrong. You know, I had an incident like that too. I talked about on a recent show over the last couple of weeks where I was in my early 20s. I trusted an old high school friend, and I actually borrowed money to invest in his company and ended up losing 6 figures. Now,
Oh, no.
I was just me. I didn't have a family to worry about, so it wasn't quite as bad. But I also find when I look back that taught me a lot, not just about gratitude, but also more tangible things about how to make good financial decisions, or how to avoid financial decisions. So, you know, tell me, what other, beside the mental game and the gratitude, what else did that experience teach you?
Oh,
you're able to
to
use
be
moving
honest,
forward?
it taught me the power of negative thinking. It taught me, I had experienced the power of positive thinking for many years. It taught me what most people experience to quite a degree. And it was shocking. And I've come out the other end, and it really was through doing gratitude practices. But I've come out the other end, and I, like you, I learned so much from this experience about the mind, about human beings, human nature. And I'm so grateful for this experience now, so grateful, because it now enables me to help people all over the world, large numbers of people all over the world, overcome their own difficult situations and
Sure.
help them expand their, what would you say, their degree of possibility dramatically. And I think it comes down to baby steps. When we take small, consistent actions, they add up. You know, the saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
And as you said, not beating yourself up is the beginning of it. So listen, I hear the music playing in my ear. That means we need to go for a commercial break. We'll be right back in just a minute. Stay with us, Mike. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. Learn the truth about Wall Street, the financial media, and the secrets they try to hide from everyday investors. This isn't just another book about investing. Working Americans who have lived through 2 major stock market crashes and the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the past 16 years don't need another book about investing. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Stop planning for retirement with your fingers crossed. Read Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Available now.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit.
We've already discussed fear as the basis of different psychological roadblocks. But what about that other key emotional driver behind financial decisions called greed? Well, most people don't like to think of themselves as greedy per se, and most people really aren't greedy in the worst sense of the word. But greed, like fear, is part of the psychological wiring of every single individual, whether we like it or not. And like fear, it's a basic survival instinct. Farm animals at a feeding trough usually have little interest in sharing. Each one instinctively wants as much food as it can get for itself at that particular moment. Of course, we're not pigs or chickens, but we are equipped with a similar instinct that compels each of us to want to get as much as we can in many situations. We've all seen footage of Black Friday sales run absolutely amok. In most cases, these are otherwise rational, sensible people who've completely gone bonkers with their basic instincts. Greed and the desire to get as much as they can while they can, and yes, FOMO, the fear of missing out, as we discussed earlier. But how does greed create roadblocks to financial success? Isn't getting as much as we can while we can a good thing where money's concerned? In fact, isn't that the very definition of financial success? Well, maybe, maybe not. Why? Because financial success isn't just about obtaining money. It's about protecting it, and it's about spending it wisely. And all of that depends upon good decision making. As everyone knows, one of the key drivers behind the financial crisis was the subprime mortgage crisis, caused in part by this thing called predatory lending practices. Millions of Americans were talked into attempting to finance homes that they really couldn't afford. Many individuals were victimized by dishonest lenders, yes, but many of the victims may bear some responsibility also. Why? Because they allowed their judgment and their more rational instincts to be clouded by greed and ended up making terrible financial decisions because of it. On some level, many were likely aware they were purchasing bigger, costlier homes than they could practically afford. Others possibly realized they really didn't have the financial stability or foundation yet to afford a home at all. But they allowed themselves to be manipulated. Why? Because they instinctively wanted to get as much as they could in that moment. The bottom line is that greed, yes, can compel us to spend more money on something than we can really afford to spend. That makes it a roadblock to financial success, because whenever you're spending more than you can afford and taking on debt, a day of reckoning is eventually inevitable. But you know, there are other ways in which greed creates roadblocks. For investors within 10 years of retirement, for example, or those who are already retired, one of the most common problems is that it delays or prevents you from shifting your focus away from growth and toward income. There's a stage of your life when it's smart and reasonable to focus on growing your assets. It's understandable when you're in your 30s, when you're in your 40s, when you want to get as much as you can while you can, even if that means investing in riskier assets. But after the age of 50 or so, when you're part of the income generation, it's more reasonable for most people to start focusing on protecting what they've already earned and on allocating it to provide a reliable income stream for retirement. In fact, regular viewers know that I believe this is perhaps the most important psychological adjustment that people need to make as retirement approaches. The shift from a growth or 401k mindset, as I like to call it, to an income mindset. But for many, greed can create a roadblock to making that shift, particularly in a time of fairly consistent stock market growth, as of course we've seen in recent years. When the market's up, most people, no matter their age or stage of life, are reluctant to pull out or even reduce their stock market exposure. Why? Because they instinctively want as much as they can get while they can get it. This greed instinct takes control, even though on some level you may realize you're at an age where reducing your market risk would be a smart financial move. Of course, this may not be a roadblock to financial success if the stock market never plunges by 50 or 60% again, and never wipes out many retirement accounts by that same amount again as it has in the past. And as investors remember, those who still focused on growth learned this the hard way from 2000 to 2003 when the market dropped by close to 50%, and again from 07 to 09 when the market dropped by almost 60%. But fear and greed are not the only sources of roadblocks to good money management. We'll discuss some of the others and how to get past them coming up in just a bit. Right now it's time to welcome back Mike Pettigrew, author of The Most Powerful Goal Achievement System in the World. And Mike, we were talking a little bit about some of your own experience that caused you to be motivated to get into this field. But if you had to go back to your own personal experience and say what the number one emotion was that maybe caused you to make a bad decision in the first place. In simple terms, what was that number one emotion, do you think, that was the first domino that caused all the others to fall?
Oh, it's so clear. Fear, David, fear. I sold my company, as I say, to a multinational. Then basically, the way my accountant structured the deal, I had to pay a huge amount of tax huge amount. He told me he could squash the tax bill, but he couldn't. And when I discovered that he wasn't able to help, I suddenly started panicking. I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to go back into business. And you know, when you are fearful, you make really bad decisions, and that's why I ended up, trusting someone. All my friends said, "You're mad. What are you doing trusting this guy?" But
Yeah.
fear, absolutely. That's the biggest.
It's a biggie. I mean, do you think that most people are aware of how strong a role personal psychology, specifically fear, plays in their decisions in determining financial success or failure? Or do you think most are really maybe oblivious to it to a certain degree?
Oblivious. I really believe, David, most people are oblivious. And it's not just fear and negative emotions. We're all conditioned. This is the biggest problem. The one thing that stops people achieving a better life, achieving financial freedom and success, is, well, all these subconscious beliefs that we have. And, we're conditioned from the moment we're born. As we go through life right into adulthood, we're told how to think and what we can achieve and what we can't achieve and what not to think and what to think. And, it's parents and relatives and brothers and sisters and teachers and religions and governments and advertising.
Sure.
By the time we get into our early 20s, we have so much baggage we're not even aware of. And it's that conditioning that holds people back. So if you don't do something about it, your ability to get to the next level is greatly curtailed, dramatically curtailed.
You really do sound like a psychologist now. It says everything goes back to your childhood. And you're right, when it comes to money, if you think about it, I have stories where even people whom I know personally, who maybe grew up thinking, oh, money is evil. If you have a lot of money, then you must be taking advantage of other people. And as a result, as they grew up and started to make money, they'd spend it faster than they'd make it. It's almost as if money was dirty. It's like, get this money away from me because, my mom and dad would have thought I'm a bad person had I made a lot of money.
That's it.
We want to come back in just a minute after this last commercial break, so please stay with us for one more segment, one more block. But as we do, we want to talk more about your process for getting people to set financial goals. We'll be right back in a minute.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. Learn the truth about Wall Street, the financial media, and the secrets they try to hide from everyday investors. This isn't just another book about investing. Working Americans who have lived through 2 major stock market crashes and the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the past 16 years don't need another book about investing. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Stop planning for retirement with your fingers crossed. Read Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Available now.
Hello, I'm Miranda Kahn. Time now to take a look at some of the stories that moved the markets this week. FedEx did better than it was expected to do profit-wise, thanks in part to federal tax cuts, higher rates, and increased volume. FedEx says its earnings were up 27% for this fiscal year. However, things are not looking so great for Starbucks. The coffee chain announced that it's closing 150 stores. They're mostly located in cities where increases in wages and other regulations are making the stores unprofitable. And most Americans don't have enough money saved for emergencies. According to Bankrate's Financial Security Index, just 29% of Americans say they have at least 6 months worth of savings, while nearly a quarter say they have no emergency savings at all. For much more on these stories, visit newsmax.com/finance. Now back to Income Generation with David Scranton.
I'm rich! I'm wealthy! Yahoo! I'm comfortably well off! Woohoo!
Yes, it's probably a little, well, daffy, should you say, to think that we'll ever experience a moment like that in our lives. But you know, in a subtler way, that attitude of feeling confidently rich and comfortably well off often does exist with some people. And in the long run, it can create another psychological roadblock to financial success. I've discussed different aspects of this roadblock on previous shows, and it's one of the most common, and that's called complacency. Some investors who've done a very good job in the growth and accumulation phases of financial planning may be susceptible to a feeling of, I've got plenty, by time retirement approaches. Whether conscious or unconscious, that feeling can lead to complacency when it comes to protecting their assets and creating a reliable income stream. They can assume that they can afford to continue taking more risks than most people at their age. Why? Because even if they suffer a loss, there's plenty more where that came from. And that's a potential roadblock long term, because they're usually not taking into account important factors, such as the fact that a 50% loss in the stock market does require 100% gain just to get back to break even again. Or the fact that many retirees vastly underestimate the impact of rising healthcare costs on their savings, and because of that are financially devastated when a major healthcare issue occurs. They also forget that studies show wealthier people are actually more likely to suffer a major financial loss. Why? Largely because of the psychological impacts of wealth, which include greed, overconfidence, and, yes, complacency. They simply forget that almost every day the media carries another story about a millionaire or even billionaire who managed to lose just about everything. Now, related to complacency is another roadblock, especially common among successful earners, and again, that's overconfidence, which can cause problems in a couple of ways. First, when it starts during the growth and accumulation phase of financial planning. Let's say, for example, you start a small company in your 30s that was bought out, much to your benefit. Then another company hired you at a high salary to manage its affairs after that. You did a great job there, and then you moved on to a bigger company, even a bigger salary. Well, that's all fantastic. But by your mid-40s, you may have developed, without flaunting it or even realizing it, an overconfident attitude about your earning potential. It's not a problem for a while, and it may even be justified, but after the age of 50, it could very well create a roadblock. Regardless of your track record, let's face it, older workers face unique hurdles in the job market that only get more and more difficult with each passing year. And in fact, if you have been a high earner throughout your career, that may in and of itself be a hurdle. Why? Because many companies would rather take a chance on a younger worker at a lower salary than pay a lot more for your experience. The point is this: the overconfident assumption that you can always, quote, make more may simply stop being true at some point in the future. And if that assumption has caused you to take on a lot of debt, or favor risky investments, for example, or otherwise have a lax attitude about protecting your money throughout your career, then obviously that needs to change. And that's where a second potential problem with overconfidence comes in. You might just be overconfident about your ability to manage your own money. Studies show that overconfidence is one of the main reasons do-it-yourself investors run into trouble with retirement planning. Their confidence outweighs their knowledge and understanding of conservative financial strategies. And this, yes, can lead to poor decision-making. Here's the bottom line. Even if you've done a great job in your wealth accumulation phase of your financial life, you may have psychological roadblocks that could cause problems in the protection and income phase. In fact, your success could be the very source of your roadblocks. And wealthier, comfortable, or financially uncertain, there is another common psychological roadblock that crops up for many investors of a certain age, regardless of their circumstances. And we'll talk about that roadblock coming up in just a bit. Right now it's time for one final block to welcome back Mike Pettigrew, author of The Most Powerful Goal Achievement System in the World. Mike, if you were teaching me about how to set and achieve goals, how would you go about doing it?
Well, to be honest, David, I think that a lot of goal achievement systems are far too complex, far too many steps, and people need simplicity. They need to get results right from the start, or else they give up. It's simple as that. So the most powerful goal achievement system in the world is only a 7-step process. And I go into it obviously in detail in my bestseller. But the first step is decide what you want. Be crystal clear about what you want. If you're not sure what you want, chances are you won't get it. Sure. But number 2 is then to emotionalize your goals. You do this by combining goals that can assist each other, so that there's a lot more depth of feeling in. Because honestly, if we don't have much feeling towards our goals, we can't achieve them. As Napoleon Hill said in Think and Grow Rich, we need to summon up a burning desire. Emotion is the number 1 factor. It acts as a catalyst to make the impossible possible. So that's number 2. Number 3 is give each goal a deadline. It's self-explanatory, and that's in every system. That's right. Number 4, program your mind. Program your mind. Now, that sounds crazy. Do you turn into some sort of cyborg? Not at all. It's converting your goals into affirmations, which are positive, empowering statements that you make to yourself morning and evening with emotion.
Absolutely.
And these affirmations, converting your goals into affirmations, works miracles. That's number 4. Number 5, plan for accelerated success. You need to plan from how to get from here to where you want to go. Action steps. A wonderful way to do this, a wonderful way, is to use mind mapping. Mind mapping is fantastic. It stimulates the creative process. That's number 5. Number 6 is become a high performer. And high performance is about succeeding above and beyond standard norms consistently over the long term. And there are very simple habits that Brendan Burchard's High Performance Institute have found that these specific habits are adopted by the world's highest performers, and anyone can use them to get way beyond what they would normally do under their own steam. That's number 6. Number 7 is and I think it's the biggest, overcome limiting beliefs. Then there is a process, very simple process, to uncover, root out those limiting beliefs that are holding you back in whatever area of life that you're trying to improve. And then there's another very simple process to overcome those limiting beliefs. Very simple, very simple. Simplicity is what human beings need these days, not complexity.
So in the 30 seconds or so we have left, tell us, is there anybody that's too old, kind of rhetorical question, to be able to do this type of thing right here and to get excited about their future? And then lastly, where can they find your book?
Definitely. I think, David, the way to stay perpetually young is to be engaged with the world, to be interested. That is what keeps us alive. So it doesn't matter. And I had someone coming to me for about 2 months ago for coaching. He's 80 years of age, and he has his own business at 80. Now, that's what I intend to be doing when I'm 80.
I love it.
Get my book. My book is available on Amazon.
Amazon?
It's first page of personal success bestsellers since last October. So I'm really happy about that. And it really can change people's lives.
I love it. I love it. I think you should go out. I think you should get Mike's book. Sounds wonderful. Mike, thank you for joining us. And you stay with us. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. Yes, they do grow up fast. And once they do, they can cause a problem facing many Americans today. And that is grown children who remain, to one extent or another, financially dependent upon parents. In fact, according to a recent Harris Poll study, 56% of parents with children over the age 18 said that they've paid for their adult children's groceries, while 40% have covered health insurance and 21% have paid for rent or housing. Now, many parents said they've also helped their adult children pay their cell phone bills, covered car insurance, paid for clothing, or entertainment expenses. Even if the financial support you're providing doesn't seem like much, it can add up over time. Let's say that for 3 years you spend $95 a month on groceries for your adult child, which is the average amount for someone under 25 years old, how much they typically spend on groceries according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Well, at the end of 3 years, that's $3,420 that you could have added to your retirement fund and started earning interest on. And groceries are one thing, But the real problem often comes from the big ticket items. For example, the average amount a person under age 25 pays for rent each month is $392. Now, pay that each month for 3 years, and you've lost over $14,000 that could easily have been invested. But the question is, how is all of this a psychological roadblock to achieving your retirement goals? Well, the roadblock for many people stems from their inability to fix the situation. The inability to say no, to insist that their grown children become financially independent on their own. And you know, it is understandable. Let's face it, the parental instinct for most mothers and fathers is as deeply rooted as the survival instincts of fear and greed. So putting your foot down and exhibiting the kind of tough love you really need to do in this type of situation can, yes, be difficult. You may realize deep down that it's a smart, even necessary financial move, but your parental instinct is creating a psychological roadblock. So you keep putting it off. And as a result, you may not only end up putting your own retirement at risk, you may be doing your children more harm than good and jeopardizing their own long-term financial success. In fact, studies show that children who receive financial support from their parents well into their 20s and beyond are far less likely to be good money managers later on than those who didn't receive that support. In other words, your own psychological roadblock may be creating different roadblocks for your children. You're creating the false impression that money does indeed grow on trees, and that is, in this case, the family tree. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a bit. If you're not using someone who's well trained in fixed income and you're born before 1966, it may just be time for you to break up with that advisor and move on. I would suggest someone who will care for you through these important years of your life. If you need help finding someone, call or write us. I'd also like to remind you of the special report entitled The Income Generation. This is available free to you, our loyal viewers, online. If you haven't downloaded your report, pick it up after the show. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. We'll see you all next Sunday.
When it comes to an investment strategy, many people get caught up in the next big thing or intrigued by a friend's can't-miss stock tip. But before you take the dive, ask yourself, does this pass the what versus the why test?
Imagine you're at the supermarket. Someone approaches and says, "Hey, what are you making tonight?" To which you reply, "Not sure. Could be a cake, could be a casserole." Unfortunately, this is an example of what investing. This is how most individuals invest. Getting so focused on the ingredients, we lose sight of the absolute objective and goal. In contrast, why investing asks 3 fundamental questions that should guide all of your decisions. Number 1, what are your absolute needs? Number 2, what are your desirable wants? And number 3, if there's any money left over, what are your aspirational legacy ideas?
Talk to your financial advisor about your goals and objectives. If you're focused on income, a dividend stock or bond strategy may be best. If appreciation is important, growth stocks in emerging areas like tech and biotech may be the way to go. And remember, you can diversify your risk by investing in sector indexes.
If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. In my book, Return on Principle, one of the things that I discuss is the absolute importance of understanding the inside game. When it comes to investing, when it comes to money management, some people and a lot of financial advisors, yes, a lot of financial advisors too, mistakenly focus only on the outside game, on the financial markets, interest rates, inflation, economic trends, what the Federal Reserve does. All of that is important, yes, but it really is only half the battle when it comes to creating a financial strategy that's right for you. Equally important is what I call the inside game, which covers all the internal factors that can impact your odds of financial success in achieving your retirement goals. The inside game is about understanding that the markets are driven mainly by emotion, as are the investment decisions of most people. The inside game is about understanding that your subconscious can play a major role in how you manage and even think about money. It's also about learning how to recognize when a psychological roadblock may be standing between you and your retirement goal, and then learning how to overcome that. So, how do you do this exactly? Well, there's no easy answer, of course, but there is a good way to get started, and actually it's quite simple. One of the 7 principles for good money management that I discuss in my book is called honesty. In fact, I recommend sitting down with a pen and paper, asking yourself some tough questions about your financial status and your personal history with money, and being brutally honest with your answers. Ask yourself questions such as, do I know for sure where my finances stand right now? Am I comfortable with the debt I'm carrying? Ask yourself, do I really know how much investment risk I'm currently taking on? Am I comfortable with my current financial advisor and his or her advice? Or, if appropriate, have I ever talked with a financial advisor? And if so, why not? In the course of answering these questions with brutal honesty, think about some of the psychological roadblocks that we've discussed on today's show. The fear of missing out, the fear of judgment, the fear of bad news, overconfidence, complacency, and yes, greed causing poor decision making. Or even parental instincts overriding good judgment. Recognizing that you have a specific roadblock and identifying it is a huge first step toward getting past it. You may just need the help of a financial professional to fully get past it, but the right advisor will have experience in helping others do exactly that. The right advisor, in other words, will know about and understand the inside game. We'll be right back in a moment. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. I'd like to thank Mike Pettigrew for joining us today for another episode of The Income Generation. And of course, yes, I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. If there's one thing I've learned in more than 3 decades as a financial advisor, it's that the job is not nearly as much about money and the markets as it is about people. Yes, there are frankly any number of ways that changes, fluctuations, and surprises in the financial markets can jeopardize your goals. But in the end, most people who end up not achieving their goals don't fail to achieve them because of the markets, but instead because of themselves. They, or their advisor, have focused too much exclusively on the outside game and have minimized or completely ignored, in some cases, the inside game. As a result, oftentimes the psychological roadblock they never even knew existed has prevented them from making good decisions. Good decisions such as taking that free financial education workshop when it was offered, or consulting with a financial advisor even though they realized on some level it was a smart idea. Decisions such as breaking off financial support of their adult children, even when they knew deep down it would have been best for everyone. And most importantly, good decisions such as reducing their market risk within 10 years of retirement and shifting their focus from portfolio growth to that of protection and income. That is a strategic shift, yes, but it can only take place after you've made the psychological shift first. Very often that means becoming comfortable with taking the road less traveled, which, yes, is difficult for some people. It may require dealing with some psychological roadblocks of your own. The bottom line is that you don't have to do it alone. A good financial advisor, one who actually understands the inside game, can help you not only identify your own mental and emotional roadblocks to financial success, he can help you get past them as well. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And yes, right here is where you can do it on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and thanks again. We'll see you next week.